What's up, my guys? What's up, my girls? AKA my dear and beloved Dani Flowers. It's good to be with you one time for the 12 times. I'm your boy, Dani Flow, your favorite podcast teacher. Or if this is your first time listening to the Dani Flow podcast, I'd like to be your favorite podcast teacher. I'd like to think that I'm your soon-to-be favorite podcast teacher. I may not be the best podcast teacher, but I'm your fave. I like to teach, so I teach you things, or as I like to say, Tingz. I teach you how you already philosophize and how you can do it better. Why I think you, my guys and my girls, should strength train. Why we should be getting married and becoming parents younger, and why we should all be Catholic. And yes, I'm aware that I'm weird, but you like it. So on this episode, I'm going to focus on philosophy, but I'm going to use strength training, marriage, fatherhood, and Catholicism as examples. So I'll get to nerd out a little bit about everything I care about to argue just that we have a philosophy about everything we care about, as the title hopefully suggests. Okay, cool. As I've mentioned before on the Dani Flow podcast and on my IGTV at Dani Flow, DANI_FLO. By the way, if you want to follow me, the traditional definition of philosophy is the love of wisdom. I'm sure all of you, my guys and my girls, are familiar with the term stigma. For example, a social stigma is a negative attitude society has toward something. Well, in my opinion, philosophy has somewhat of a stigma. But what I mean by that is philosophy as an academic discipline or subject of study. So I'm a philosophy major. Some people are philosophy minors. So we study philosophy academically, and I like to describe it to people as studying the history of ideas. Humans have been around for quite a long time. Humans have the ability to think, so we've had ideas. Therefore, as philosophers say, there have been a number of ideas that have made a lasting impact, and we study them to see why they made a lasting impact and to see if, independently of whether it made an impact or not, if the idea or ideas were wise. Because in philosophy, we attempt not to assume anything, which is one of the reasons some people get frustrated with philosophy. They accuse philosophers of explaining the obvious or the nonsensical. So we don't assume that just because an idea was popular or made an impact that it was a wise idea, or the reverse. The reverse is also true as well. So we don't assume that just because an idea or ideas don't become popular or make a lasting impact, that they were not good ideas and that they were not wise ideas. So we study the ancient Greek philosophers and try to extract wisdom, if there is any, from them. We study the medieval philosophers and try to extract wisdom, if there is any, from them. We study the modern philosophers and the postmodern philosophers and try to extract wisdom from their ideas, if there is any. And then we use that foundation to look at the world today and see what our own culture and society thinks is valuable, and we think and decide if our culture and society has chosen wisely. Should I, Dani Flow, value the same thing as the culture and society I live in? The society is the people I live with, Rockford, Illinois, USA, and the culture is what they cultivate to, what they hold to be the things, or as I like to say, Tingz, what they hold to be the things of highest value. So not everyone is called or wants to or feels like they need to study philosophy. And even if one does study philosophy, not everyone feels or wants or feels the need or feels called to analyze and be philosophical about the world around them today, right? That last part that I mentioned. But we can also think of philosophy not as an academic discipline, but simply as a matter of thinking and explaining and giving reasons for why one thinks what one thinks, aka philosophizing. And that is what I assert all of us do without realizing it. Now, remember, I'm a philosophy major, so I'm going to try not to assume anything. So, humans have the ability to think. That is fact. However, it does not necessarily follow that we think well or wisely, but because humans have the ability to think, we therefore have the ability to philosophize. which is to explain and give reasons for why we think what we think and why we think what we think is true. However, again, it does not necessarily follow that we philosophize well. And even if we're explaining what we think to ourselves, that's also philosophizing. When I was coming up with this argument, I was trying to come up with and think of reasons why I believe or think all humans philosophize and don't necessarily have a problem with philosophy in that sense. Cool. So it is only in the sense as an academic discipline that some people seem to have a problem with philosophizing. So when I was coming up with this argument, I was philosophizing with myself. But philosophizing with you, my guys and my girls, is way much funner. Okay, cool. So we all philosophize with ourselves or with our bestie or nextie bestie or with our fam bam. But what do we philosophize about? That's a great question, right? Whatever it is that we care about, or if we don't care about something, we philosophize about why we don't care about it or why it's not important. We have a philosophy about everything we care about. And let me use myself as an example because that's the easiest. So I strength train. I have a philosophy about strength training. I have a strength training philosophy. So remember, philosophy is a love of wisdom. So I think there's a wise way to go about strength training, or I think I can extract wisdom from strength training if there is any. Remember, we don't want to assume just because we care about something or like something that there's any wisdom to extract. But I might say that the wise way to strength train is to make sure that you incorporate some version of the squat, whether it's body weight, barbell, dumbbell, kettlebell, maybe Smith machine, or maybe there's a weight plate loaded machine that you can squat on. And I might say don't just use selectorized machines for your legs. A selectorized machine is a machine that has the weight stacks and you move the pin to select the weight resistance that you want. I might say it's not wise if you just do that because it'll take longer for you to develop muscular legs, or you simply just won't develop the size you want if you exclude an actual squat that I mentioned. Or if I want to argue that I've extracted wisdom from weightlifting, I can do that as well. And I did do that. In my last episode, I argued for why strength training makes other things easier. For example, the example that I was talking about was in the last episode was that on a particular Friday morning, I woke up early and squatted 260 pounds, which is hard for me, could be easier for other people, but that made, something like working at the office answering emails easier. I did it rather effortlessly. And in addition to that, so that's the end of that example. So the next example is that I also care about, because remember, we have a philosophy about things that we care about, and we care about a lot of things, and we care about a lot of things to different degrees. But just by virtue of the fact that we care about them, we have a philosophy about them. We think there's a wise way to do it, to go about it. We think that by doing it, we can extract wisdom from it, and we can apply it to ourselves and apply it to other people. So I also care about marriage, so I have a philosophy on that, as most people do. Some people might argue not to get married ever, and they'll give you reasons for that. That's their philosophy on marriage. Some say wait until you're a certain age. Some say wait until you've achieved certain things, a college degree, a career, a certain house or car. Some say wait late until life, once you've done everything else and you've gotten most things out of your system. These are all philosophies of marriage. They're asserting there's a wise way to enter into marriage or a wise way to get married. And if we talk to someone who has been married a long time, they've extracted wisdom from their marriage life. They might say something like, this is what I learned my first year of marriage. This is what I learned after 5 years of marriage, and so on and so forth. These are both ways to philosophize about marriage. Okay, cool. The same goes with fatherhood. I think fatherhood is great. I think men are born to be fathers and husbands and brothers, and everything else in life helps us be good fathers and husbands and brothers. This podcast that I started and am doing and enjoy doing, I think this is helping me be a good father and husband and brother, not the other way around. Of course, on Instagram it says I'm a podcaster, but that's just not as important as being a good husband and father. On my deathbed, I won't be frantically trying to figure out how to cheat death in order to make more podcast episodes. I'm going to try to cheat death to spend more time with my wife and kids and grandkids if I'm, blessed enough to meet them all. I have somewhat of an emotional argument for this. I disclose that it's somewhat of an emotional argument because in philosophy we don't like to appeal to the emotions, right? Because we think that's somewhat of like a cheap shot, right? Because usually when we're emotional, we're not thinking clearly. We're thinking kind of fuzzy, kind of muddy, kind of just unclear. So that's why I disclose it's somewhat of an emotional argument. But we all might have like a favorite podcaster. I'm obviously yours. If I'm not, that's okay. That's your philosophy of me as a podcaster. See, I just gave you another example, which is why I should be your favorite. But let's say you have a favorite podcaster, and he's a man, and he has a wife and some kids. He's a married man and a father. But then you discover that he neglects his wife and his kids and isn't really a good husband and father, right? You have good reasons to believe that. So I think most people would have a problem with that. Again, in philosophy, we don't like to assume, so I will admit, right? I will admit that some people would not care. Some people would not care if their favorite podcaster neglected their wife and kids. But I think it is probable that some people would be bothered and maybe even stop listening to their favorite podcaster once they found out this information, right? I think this example, although as I disclosed is an emotional example, I think this example goes to show that podcasting is secondary to something like fatherhood or husbandness. That's a part of my philosophy on fatherhood. And I've been a father for like 2 years now. Pretty new, right? Pretty green, as they say, the infamous they. And something wise that I've extracted from fatherhood is that kids do not care about your plans. And of course, it's unknowingly. They don't have a sense of what your plans are, and they don't actively or purposefully try to throw them off, right? Therefore, as philosophers say, you just have to care about your plans less, in the sense of it's not that you have to stop caring about them at all, but in the sense that if something happens to throw them off, to throw you off schedule, or maybe sometimes your plans are ruined, you just have to have a good sense of humor about it. Kids are, for the most part, very cute, and I'd like to think God made them so cute so that when they do ruin your plans, you just have a good sense of humor about it. All right, just when they cause chaos in your lives. And fortunately, I think that all of the things that have gone wrong because of something Chunky Butts has done, I think it has made me more patient. I'm definitely more patient than I used to, and I notice that I tend to be more patient than people, especially people my age that don't have kids, and even people that are not my age, that are much older than me, and their kids have grown up and they're out of the house, and so they're back to being by themselves. Because again, in philosophy, we don't like to assume. So if we can learn to be patient, we definitely can unlearn to be patient. And another thing that I don't want to assume is just because I learned patience through fatherhood, it is entirely possible that being a father, so it's entirely possible to become a father and not gain any more patience than what you started with, but someone else, some other guy could have extracted some other type of wisdom from fatherhood. Okay, cool. So lastly, we all have a philosophy of religion. Some think it's wise to be religious of any kind. Doesn't matter what it is, just pick one. Some don't think it's wise at all to be any religion, right? Don't pick any of them. Some only like to extract wisdom from religion. So they'll look at what the different religions teach, and they'll pick out what they think is wise. But they don't think any religion is worth joining because they don't think it's wise to ascend to all of the doctrines or teachings that a religion asserts. Some don't think it's wise to even speak of religion because it can be a sensitive thing, or as I like to say, ting. Some think it's too controversial. If you're me, and you're not, right? I'm me. I think Catholicism is the right religion. I only think it's wise to be Catholic. If I weren't Catholic, I've mentioned before on a previous episode, I wouldn't be any other religion. If I had good reasons to believe Catholicism is false, then I'd become atheist. It's all or nothing, right? It's either Catholicism or atheism. And I would probably be one of those people I described that only like to extract seeds of wisdom from religion but wouldn't join any particular one at that point, because as a whole, or at least whatever the central assertion was for each of them, then I would think they were all false. But as a Catholic, I even have a philosophy on what a practicing Catholic is, and surprise, it's the same as the churches. To be a practicing Catholic, you have to believe everything the church teaches on matters of faith and morals, and if you don't, you're disqualified, whether you like it or not. Some people, unfortunately, don't see it that way, and it's interesting, to say the least, because not everyone, right? Because in philosophy, we don't like to assume one, but those of us who are homeowners, right, we have rules for our house, and sometimes someone that you invite over to your house, they might break a rule or do something that you're not cool with, and then if you explain it to them, again, in philosophy we don't like to assume everything, so most people might say, I'm sorry, I won't do it again, I didn't know, right? I think it's probable that the minority of people wouldn't do what I'm going to describe next, right? Which is that if you explain to someone something that you don't allow in your house, right? If they don't want to follow it, if they want to do that thing anyways, then you ask them to leave. And if they don't want to leave, then you have to force them via the police, right? But some people, right, even further, some people not only want to stay in your house after they've done something that you don't you're not cool with, but then they get offended that you say, hey, you probably should leave the house, aka the church, because you're not following the house rules, aka believing and practicing what the church teaches on matters of faith and morals, and they're offended. They're like, how dare you? So anyways, some final examples on things, or as I like to say, Tingz, we have a philosophy on, or Tingz we assert there's a wise way to do, or we assert we've accrued wisdom from doing it or experiencing it. A big one, but also as sensitive or controversial as religion is politics. We all have a political philosophy, right? If we care about politics, now remember I said, if you don't care about something, you usually have a philosophy on why it's not important, why we shouldn't care about it. So we all have a political philosophy in the sense of we might say it's important and here's why, or it's not important and here's why. And then if you do think it's important, then your philosophy just goes further from that. But it doesn't have to be sensitive or controversial. It's just things, or as I like to say, things that we care about, things we're interested in, things we're passionate about. Last Friday, I made an argument that most girls have a philosophy of leggings, and that's available on my IGTV if you, my guys and my girls, are interested. So let me know what you think, my guys and my girls. Do you understand philosophizing a little bit better? Yes or no? And why? Do you understand what I mean by asserting or explaining there's a wise way to do a thing? How about, do you understand what I mean by extracting wisdom from a thing? Does that make sense? Yes or no? Do you have philosophy of philosophy? Is it a gigantic waste of time? I'd love to hear about that. What about strength training? What's your philosophy on that? And marriage and father or motherhood, and religion and Catholicism. If you want to get better about thinking and philosophizing, make a list of things that you care about and ask yourself, why do I care about this? and explain it to yourself, and you're welcome to explain it to me. Let me know what you have a philosophy on. How? That's a great question. Stuttered a bit. So please send me a DM on IG at DaniFlow, DANI_FLO. Comment below if you're watching on YouTube. Send me a snap if you've added me on Snapchat. Send me a voice message on Anchor. The link to that is below. However you, my guys and my girls, want. And if you're watching on YouTube, thanks so much for watching. Please like and share the link to the video so you can help me grow my channel. If you're watching and are not a subscriber, please subscribe and let me know in the comments how you found me and what I did to gain you as a subscriber. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, thanks so much for listening. Please share the link to the podcast so you can help me reach more people, and leave a review if you're feeling generous with your time. The link to support the Dani Flow podcast financially is below. Please consider it if you like the podcast and you want to add a monetary value to it. If not, that's totally cool. Please keep listening anyways, and share my podcast with your bestie and your nextie bestie and your fan bam, and please share it on your Instagram stories if you're feeling generous. And subscribe or follow my podcast and YouTube channel so that you know when I upload a new episode on both or either platforms. Thanks for putting up with me, my guys and my girls. I'm aware that I'm weird, but you like it, so let me know what you think. We're a fan of thinking here on the Dani Flow podcast. We like thinking here on the Dani Flow podcast, so please share your thoughts with me. As always, my dear and beloved Dani Flowists, remember what Venerable Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen taught us: your life is worth living. Love you, my guys and my girls. Bye.